Camp Whispering Pines had been abandoned for 3 decades, yet the photographs hanging on the walls still changed every night. The eyes in the pictures seemed to look straight at you, reminding you that this place had never truly slept. Nah. Alex stood on the mist-covered trail in the late afternoon, his hand clutching his backpack and recorder, trying to steady his heartbeat. The summer camp before him rose like a ruin swallowed by time. Cracked wooden cabins, peeling paint, a dried and rusted swimming pool, faded signs barely showing the words, "Welcome to Whispering Pines." The wind hissed through the old pine branches, creaking as though the entire forest was whispering forgotten secrets. Mia stepped closer, her face pale, her arms wrapped around her chest. "Are you sure we should go in?" she asked, her voice trembling but laced with curiosity. Alex glanced around, his eyes landing on an old photograph hanging on the main cabin wall. It showed a group of children laughing, standing on green grass under a bright sun, but their eyes seemed to shift, following every move they made. "Jake," the skeptical companion let out a dry laugh. "Probably just an illusion. The camera will prove it." He pulled out his camera, snapped a quick photo, and checked the screen. What appeared was nothing like the original image. The children's eyes were locked directly on him, their lips parting as though moving, smiling without sound. No one dared to speak. The air grew heavier, thick and suffocating. The scent of rotting wood and damp forest leaves mingled with a chilling dread that crawled down their spines. The creak of the cabin doors and the whisper of the wind formed a haunting symphony, making them feel as if they had crossed into another realm, one where time stood still and memories were trapped. Alex climbed the steps of the main cabin, his trembling hand brushing against the photograph on the wall. A wave of fear and fascination surged through him. Mia clutched his hand as if holding onto the last thread of sanity. Jake, still skeptical, began to falter, the doubt in his eyes slowly twisting into obsession as he realized that every photograph in the camp carried something alive, a message they couldn't yet decipher. As dusk settled, the chirping of insects blended with the moan of the pine forest. Alex finally understood. The camp wasn't just abandoned. It was alive, watching. The photographs, the hollow smiles, were doorways into the past, where the missing children and long-buried secrets still lingered. A cold gust swept through the cabin, rattling every picture frame at once. Alex's brow furrowed, his heart pounding furiously. He knew then that they had just stepped into a spiral of haunting from which there might be no escape. Night fell faster than they expected. Whispering Pines camp sank into a suffocating darkness, broken only by the dim glow of Alex's flashlight. The cold seeped through every crack in the cabin walls, making all 3 of them shiver. The rustle of leaves, the scrape of branches against the rotting roof, created strange sounds, like faint laughter echoing from the past. Alex stepped toward a photograph hanging in the common room. By day, it showed children laughing carelessly, but now, under the flickering light, their eyes seemed to shift, following him. He squinted, telling himself it was only a trick of the shadows. But he looked closer. The smiles curled unnaturally, and the eyes blinked as if aware of his presence. Mia stood beside him, murmuring, her trembling hands pressed against her chest. "Do you see it? They're looking at us." Her voice was soft, yet the echo in the empty room made the words chilling. Alex drew in a deep breath, trying to shake off the dread clawing at him. But deep down, memories surfaced. Stories the locals once told of missing children, of mysterious cases tied to the camp. And now, All of it seemed to manifest right before his eyes. Jake, ever the skeptic, pulled out his camera and snapped a shot. But when he checked the screen, what appeared was not the same as reality. The children in the picture were staring directly at him, their eyes alive, their lips moving as if speaking. His breath caught, leaving him speechless. Alex realized then that the camera wasn't recording what was there. It was recording what the camp wanted them to see, the memories of victims still trapped within its walls. They moved through other cabins. Each photograph changed. Every image followed them, the children's actions repeating the final fragments of their past lives. Mia slowed to a halt, her shaking hands pressed to her chest, her eyes fixed on an old photo in the dining hall. She whispered, trance-like, They remember us." The weight of it pressed down on her, almost hypnotic. Alex felt his reason slipping, his mind pulled apart. The creaking wood, the drip of water from the empty pool, the faint laughter from the pines, merged into a haunting symphony, a hypnotic spiral. Each of their steps seemed preordained, guiding them deeper into the camp, into the stories of the missing children. Jake raised his camera again, took another shot. This time, the children's eyes seemed to pierce straight into his soul. His chest tightened, his breath quickened. A sudden realization struck him. The camp didn't just want to tell its story. It wanted them to live it, to experience the last terror of its victims. Escape was meaningless. The camp controlled the rhythm, the space, even their thoughts. A laugh echoed from the dry pool. Mia screamed, but Alex pulled her close, struggling to anchor his own sanity. He glanced at the pool's black water, catching his reflection, but it wasn't his present self. His eyes in the reflection carried the camp's mark, staring as though from a moment that had happened years ago. They understood a dreadful truth. Whispering Pines was not abandoned. It was alive, and the memories of the lost still lingered, steering every step, every glance, every thought. Alex knew they had stepped into a vicious loop between present and memory. A spiral where each step, each photograph, pulled them deeper into the darkness. Moonlight filtered through the branches, casting shadows across the decaying cabins. The eyes in the photographs blinked faintly, as if to remind them. Those who enter Whispering Pines will never leave the same. New Pa. As the heavy night swallowed Whispering Pines camp whole, Alex, Mia, and Jake slipped into an old cabin at the camp center. The photographs here were older, warped, and darker than the ones before. The flashlight flickered, its beam glancing off cracked walls, where the stench of mildew crept through the air, making them shiver. Alex bent down and picked up a torn, leather-bound journal. On the first page, scrawled in desperate handwriting, were the words, "We are not allowed to leave. If anyone enters, they must stay." The letters etched themselves into his mind, a sharp pain stabbing through his chest. Mia shuddered, clutching Alex's arm tightly, her eyes locked on a photograph hanging on the wall. Children playing in a field, yet their eyes tracked her every move. Jake raised his camera, snapping photos of the journal and the wall. When he checked the screen, the children in the picture no longer looked carefree. They were replaying their final moments before vanishing, their eyes wide with terror, lips trembling as if trying to speak but unable to form words. Jake froze, feeling as though he had been dragged into that very moment, sharing in the panic of children long gone. Alex read further. The entries spoke of a mysterious crime decades ago. A group of children vanished one summer, and the camp staff remained silent, as if threatened. Some victims were labeled as runaways, but every trace of them had been erased. The last words in the journal were written in desperation. "We hear laughter, but no one is there. Run." Mia staggered back, pressing her hand to her forehead, her eyes wide but vacant. She whispered, They're still here, trapped in memory." Alex realized the camp did not merely hold images. It held the victims' final moments, frozen between reality and memory. Every step, every gaze, pulled them deeper into a supernatural loop. A floorboard creaked in the corner. Alex turned, seeing the children's eyes in a photograph shift, locking onto him. For the first time, he felt himself being pulled into the picture. Memories of the camp rushed over him. Children's laughter, faint screams, summer games looping endlessly into horror. Jake trembled, glancing around. Every cabin, every path, every photograph replayed the last fragments of those children's lives. And now, the three of them were becoming part of that memory. Alex understood. If they kept exploring, they would no longer distinguish present from past. And yet, obsession drove them onward, the desperate need to uncover the truth pushing them deeper. A cold gust swept through the cabin, nearly knocking Mia off balance, but her gaze remained fixed on another photograph. In that moment, Alex understood. The camp wasn't just telling its story. It was making them witnesses, pulling them into the cycle of horror, where escape was impossible without unraveling the truth behind its haunting. Children's laughter echoed from everywhere, not from any one cabin, but seeping from the walls, the floorboards, and their own minds. Alex closed his eyes, taking a trembling breath, feeling hypnotized. A part of him warned. Every photograph was watching, reminding them that the curious never leave unchanged. When they finally stepped out of the cabin into the barren campyard, moonlight spilled through the trees. But the light brought no comfort. The darkness still lived around them, and every photograph, every trapped memory followed close behind, reminding them that the spiral of whispering pines had only just begun. Na, en, tio, he. Children's laughter still echoed as Alex, Mia, and Jake stepped out of the old cabin. But instead of fading into the wind, the sound drew closer, circling them in the dark. Alex's flashlight sputtered, its weak beam swallowed by the suffocating blackness. "Someone's here with us," Jake whispered hoarsely. "No," Alex muttered, eyes fixed on the forest ahead. "Not the living." They pressed deeper into the camp's heart, to the small square where children once gathered for campfire stories. The burned logs from decades past still lay scattered, blackened and rotting. In the center, a ring of stones marked the old fire pit. Yet somehow, in the freezing dark, thin tendrils of smoke rose, as if the fire had only just been put out. Mia clutched Alex's arm, trembling. "Do you see? The ashes. They're still warm." Alex crouched to touch them, but a sudden gust swept through, scattering the ashes into a spiraling cloud. For an instant, he saw children's faces forming within it, distorted, panicked, before dissolving back into smoke. Jake snapped a photo, but on his screen, the fire pit was ablaze. Dozens of children sat in a ring around it, their faces pale, eyes black as pits, mouths stretched into unblinking grins. One child stared straight into the lens, and Jake felt its gaze pierce directly into him. "We have to leave," he stammered, cold sweat dripping down his face. But when they turned toward the path they had taken in, Alex froze. The dirt road was gone. In its place towered a wall of dense trees, so high it blotted out the sky. The camp had shifted, reshaping itself into a labyrinth of shadows. Mia clutched her head, muttering, "I dreamed this. There's no way out. Everything just repeats." Alex pulled her up, forcing calm into his voice. "No, there has to be a way. There has to..." But even he felt the weight of a horrifying truth. They had stepped into Whispering Pine's endless loop. They tried another direction, weaving through rows of sagging cabins. The windows were black hollows, like empty eye sockets. Yet as Alex passed each one, he glimpsed silhouettes of children standing still inside, their faces pressed against the glass. Every cabin, every window, was another memory trapped in place. Mia froze before a cabin door, where a photograph hung. It was a summer group photo from 1975, but instead of carefree smiles, every face dripped with blood, eyes clouded, mouths twisted in silent screams. Stranger still, at the very back row stood 3 adults, identical to Alex, Mia, and Jake, staring out of the frame. Mia shrieked, stumbling backward. "No, Alex, that's us." Alex leaned in. His heart thundered, blood freezing in his veins. It was true. There they were, perfectly captured in a photo over 40 years old. Jake trembled, his voice breaking. "Either we've been here before, or we'll be here forever." Children's laughter rose again, this time threaded with sobs. Then a child's whisper brushed Alex's ear from behind. "Stay and play with us." He spun around, nothing but darkness. Yet Mia's eyes widened in horror. She saw her clearly, a little blonde girl, wide-eyed, standing right beside Alex. Her face was pale, lips stretched in a silent grin. Mia screamed, but to Alex, she only thrashed like someone possessed. In that instant, he understood the truth. None of them were seeing the same reality. The camp was splintering their minds, dragging each into separate memories. Suddenly, Jake bolted, clutching his head, screaming, "I can't take it. They want me." Alex lunged after him, but too late. Jake vanished into the black pines, his screams echoing, then fading into silence. Only Alex and Mia remained, lost in the shifting maze. They ran blindly, every path circling back to the fire pit. This time, the ashes no longer smoldered. They erupted into flames, casting light on the children seated around it. In unison, the children's voices rang out. "Stay with us. Stay forever." Mia sobbed, clutching Alex tight. "No, I don't want to disappear. I don't want to become their memory." Alex held her hand, eyes locked on the fire. And there, in the flames, he saw Jake, his face twisted, already merged with the children, eyes empty, grin hollow. Jake was gone. Alex whispered, voice breaking, "We have to break the loop before it's too late." Mia's tear-streaked face lifted to his, but in her eyes, Alex saw something far worse than fear, the shadow of doubt. Were they still themselves, or had they already begun to fade into the camp's eternal memory? The fire roared higher, the circle closed in, and Whispering Pines sang its lullaby of damnation. No one leaves. No one ever leaves. The fire roared violently in the center of the square, illuminating the pale faces of children sitting in a circle. Alex and Mia were trapped inside the ring of flames. The heat scorched their skin, yet the air around them was freezing to the bone. No sound remained except for the whispered chant, as though hundreds of small throats sang together. No one leaves. No one leaves. Mia collapsed to her knees, covering her ears, tears mixing with sweat. Alex tried to pull her up, but his own arms trembled, as if an unseen force was binding every muscle. Each time he looked into the children's eyes, his mind clouded and fragments of memory were stripped away. He heard his mother calling from afar, then the laughter of his little brother. Personal memories, long buried, now flooded his mind. Yet twisted, warped, infused with images of whispering pines. Alex understood. The summer camp was devouring memories, hollowing them out, and turning them into the same empty shells Jake had become. Alex. Mia's voice cracked, trembling. I can't remember my parents' faces anymore. It's like they're being erased. Alex gripped her hand tighter, forcing himself to stare into the fire. Within its crimson blaze, fleeting visions appeared. The summer of 1975, children laughing around the fire pit, the strum of a guitar, and then a scream that tore the night apart. Flames spread, consuming cabins, while the shadow of a man emerged. His face was blurred, but his eyes glowed like embers. He didn't kill with a knife or a gun. All it took was a song, a chilling melody, and the children hurled themselves into the fire. From that night onward, Whispering Pines was cursed forever. Alex staggered back, chest heaving. That's how it began. Someone bound their souls here with music. Mia lifted her tear-streaked face, desperation blazing in her eyes. Then to escape, we have to break the song, break the loop. They rushed into the large cabin, the main hall. The wooden doors creaked open, as if the camp itself was inviting them inside. The interior was pitch black, heavy with dust. But along the main wall hung rows of group photos from summers past. Hundreds of childlike faces, yet each photo seemed alive, their eyes moving slowly, following every step. Mia shuddered and pointed to the oldest photograph. Summer, 1975.2. At the center, beside the children, stood the blurred man from the campfire vision. He clutched a guitar, his mouth frozen open in mid-song. Alex stepped closer. The instant his hand touched the frame, the singing erupted inside his head, deafening, rattling his skull. The hall trembled, windows slamming violently. One by one, the photos crashed to the floor, glass shattering, and from within the frames, tiny hands stretched out, clawing to drag them inside. Alex! Mia screamed, wrapping her arms around him, yanking him away from the trance. Don't listen, they just want to trap you in the memory. He bit his lip until blood ran, forcing himself awake. Then he remembered Jake's abandoned camera. Alex snatched it from the floor, hands shaking as he switched it on. On the screen, clear in the darkened hall, the man stood right behind them, guitar dangling from his hand. Alex spun around. Nothing, but the guitar strings hummed, a sound like a blade cutting through the air. They ran, but no matter how far they went, they always ended up back inside the same hall. Every exit dissolved. The room became a box of memory, looping endlessly. Each time they crossed a doorway, they returned to the beginning. Mia's hope dimmed, her eyes going hollow. Maybe we've been here all along, Alex. Maybe we're just remembering. Alex grabbed her shoulders, shouting, "No, I won't let you fade. We have to break it." His gaze locked on the guitar, the last remnant of the man who cast the curse. The figure was gone, but the music remained, echoing for decades. Alex lunged, wrenching the guitar from the spectral air. The moment he touched it, searing pain tore through his body. Hundreds of children's images flooded his mind. Screams, songs, smoke, and fire tangled together. He collapsed, convulsing, clinging to the instrument. "Mia, you have to smash it! Smash it!" Hands shaking, Mia saw Alex's eyes dimming, his soul slipping. She screamed, lifted the guitar, and slammed it against the wooden floor. The crash thundered, a dreadful sound as though the forest itself wailed. The fire outside blazed one final time, then extinguished. The singing ceased. Silence, deep and absolute, swallowed everything. When Mia opened her eyes, she was lying on damp grass beneath the cold dawn. The cabins, the square, the fire pit, all gone. Only a ruined forest remained. Alex lay beside her, gasping, his eyes wide open but changed. "Did we escape?" Mia whispered, her voice shaking. Alex didn't answer. He sat up, scanning the clearing. In his hand was a charred fragment of the guitar. He gripped it tightly, then turned to her, lips moving, and she realized he was humming the old tune. Mia froze, heart clenching in terror. Alex turned toward her, a slow smile spreading across his face. Empty, soulless. From deep in the forest, children's laughter echoed once more. Whispering Pines never lets anyone leave. Ah, Kay. Amid the snowbound peaks of the Sierra Nevada, the name Donner lingers like a curse. In the winter of 1846, a wagon party was trapped in the storms, forced to consume one another to survive. Locals whisper that whenever a blizzard rises, the old cabin where they once huddled flares to life again. Inside, withered skeletons sit eternally around the table, beckoning lost travelers to join a feast without end, where the meat is always warm. Say. The storm came without warning, swallowing the Sierra Nevada in a suffocating white sea. Nathan, leading his group of 3 hikers, fought to find a path through the leaning pines, but the blizzard erased every trace of the trail. Their breaths puffed out in frozen clouds, each step sinking thigh-deep into the snow. Nightfall dropped swiftly, draping the mountains in a dim, oppressive shroud. The cold sliced through skin and bone, numbing Nathan's fingers even through his gloves. Hunger gnawed at them, tremors racked their bodies, and fear seeped in with every step. They no longer knew which direction led back to camp. All that remained was the sensation of being swallowed alive by a labyrinth of ice. Just as despair took hold, a shape loomed through the storm. A weather-beaten cabin, roof sagging under a heavy crown of snow, its doorway nearly buried. Nathan stumbled forward, shouldered open the groaning door, and was met by a gust of air thick with mildew, rotting wood, and the faint tang of old smoke. Inside, weak light filtered through cracks, falling on layers of dust. The cabin was cramped, its timber walls split with age, yet it still bore the trace of human habitation. Around a mold-stained table sat 3 skeletons, slumped as if caught mid-meal. Their hollow sockets bored into the gloom, jaws sagging open as though their final words had frozen in their throats. In the corner, The stone hearth lay long extinguished, though the blackened ash still clung like a shadow. Scattered across the floor were fragments of bone half buried in dirt. The place did not feel abandoned. It felt paused, arranged by some unseen hand only moments before, waiting for the next act to begin. The wind outside shrieked through the gaps in the walls, stretching into a mournful moan. Nathan stood frozen, the chill of the rotting boards seeping into his legs. Death had never left this cabin. It was only waiting for the next soul to step inside. Naya. Night fell faster than they expected. Outside, the blizzard screamed and smothered the entrance, sealing the cabin into their only refuge. Nathan and his two companions fed the hearth with rotting timber. The fire cracked to life, casting a jaundiced glow across the warped wooden walls, illuminating the three skeletons still seated in silence around the table. The air was thick with damp and mildew, but soon something else began to seep through. At first, it was only the faint tang of ancient ash. Then, as the flames roared brighter, a greasy scent spread, sharp and cloying, like burning fat. Nathan frowned. None of them carried food. And yet, the unmistakable odor of roasting flesh filled the room. A sound stirred near the hearth. At first, the faint pop of splintering wood. Then a steady clack, clack, clack. The cadence of a knife striking a cutting board. An old pot balanced on the stones began to tremble, rattling softly before exploding in a metallic clang, as though an unseen hand had hurled a spoon against its side. They froze. The cabin was small, every corner visible, yet no figure stood there. Only the lifeless relics quivered in the firelight, animated by some invisible force. Nathan swallowed hard, telling himself it was only exhaustion conjuring illusions. But then the pot's lid snapped open, revealing ash gone cold, and within it, charred fragments of bone. A ribbon of smoke uncoiled upward, twisting like a beckoning finger before dissolving into the gloom, leaving behind a stench of scorched flesh that thickened the air. Footsteps followed, soft, deliberate, dragging, circling the table. The skeletons remained unmoving in their chairs, but the empty space between them seemed to swell with a darkness more solid than shadow. On the table, a cracked wooden bowl inched forward, scraping until it halted before Nathan. In the shifting firelight, it looked freshly placed, as though by a host eager to serve. The wood even seemed warm to the touch. Outside, the storm howled like a starving beast. Inside, the air pressed heavy and close, suffocating, charged with the quiet anticipation of invisible guests, preparing a feast not meant for the living. By me. The fire roared higher, though they had fed it nothing more. Its sickly glow spilled across the warped walls, stretching shadows into grotesque shapes. For an instant, it seemed the skeletons hunched at the table were stirring, necks lolling forward, then snapping upright again in the blink of an eye. Nathan rubbed his eyes, blaming exhaustion, but when he looked back, the table had transformed. The cracked wooden bowls, empty when they first entered, now brimmed with steaming cuts of meat. Thick, red, glistening slices, releasing a savory scent that clawed at their starved stomachs. Hunger stabbed at Nathan's gut like needles, wearing down every instinct to resist. One of his companions, weaker than the rest, trembled as he reached for a piece. In the firelight, it resembled venison or wild boar, something plausible in these mountains. He shoved it into his mouth, chewing greedily, teeth grinding with frantic abandon. At first, Nathan only felt envy at the sound of flesh between his companion's teeth. But then, The firelight shifted, and Nathan saw it. Embedded in the glossy meat was a scorched fingernail, jutting from pale sinew. A long, charred strand of hair clung to his friend's lip, singed and acrid. The man didn't notice, only chewed faster, eyes bulging, face flushed in delirious satisfaction. Nathan's breath caught, his blood running cold. He tried to scream, but his throat was sandpaper, too dry to form sound. More platters appeared on the table, neatly arranged, still steaming. What had smelled rich now reeked of roasted flesh and burnt blood. The cabin shifted. From the corners rose whispers, at first single syllables, then twisted invitations, lullabies warped and muffled as if sung through soil. Each murmur raised the hair on Nathan's skin, as though the rotten floor itself was pleading. And then came another sound, the wail of a child. Thin, relentless, muffled as though it seeped up from beneath the boards. The air turned brittle with cold. Nathan looked back, and his heart froze. One of the skeletons had moved. Its skull, once slumped, was now lifted, eyeless hollows fixed on him. Its jaw worked soundlessly, yet its rhythm matched the whispers surrounding them. The chair groaned under its shifting weight, as if it prepared to rise. The second friend collapsed into sobs, clutching his head, babbling nonsense. His gaze flicked from the food to the bone figures, and then, in a frenzy, he lunged at the table. He snatched up a half-burnt femur, still streaked with flesh, and sank his teeth in. Blackened blood oozed down his chin, pattering onto the wood below. The cabin shook. Pots and pans clattered like war drums, their tempo quickening, urging. Footsteps, dozens, heavy and hurried, circled them, closing the trap. Nathan understood then. The banquet had never ended. The Donna dead, once starving, once cannibals, remained. The bones were husks. Their spirits lingered, hosting, serving, waiting for strays to join their feast. His vision blurred. In a blink, the cabin swarmed with gaunt phantoms, skin shredded, jaws working, mouths smeared crimson, hands reaching. The skeletons rose from their chairs, vertebrae cracking, heads twisting at impossible angles, welcoming the newcomers. Nathan staggered back, his spine pressed to the icy wall. But he knew there was no escape. The cabin's door was gone, swallowed by the dark. Only the fire remained, burning bright and red, lighting the endless feast of the starving dead who hammered their rhythm, calling him to the table. The cabin was no longer a refuge. It had become a living banquet hall. Fire roared in the hearth, casting the walls in a frenzy of dancing shadows, shapes of shredded bodies swaying and gnawing, though in truth only 3 living men remained. Yet, to Nathan, the room was overflowing with guests. Invisible diners leaned close to their feast, every eyeless stare fixed upon him. The first companion, the one who had eaten first, slumped over the table, his shoulders jerking in violent spasms. His spine jutted sharp against his skin as ragged flesh tore open, exposing the raw meat beneath. Nathan watched in horror as ribs surfaced, splitting through as though some unseen butcher worked from within. But no blood spilled, only the choking perfume of fat sizzling on coals, sweet and rancid, filling every breath. The second friend still clutched his charred bone, but now a hoarse laughter bubbled from his throat. His eyes clouded white, his tongue lolling, black blood dribbling down his chin. When he lifted his head, Nathan recoiled. His face was collapsing inward, cheeks hollowing, teeth lengthening into jagged fangs. Rents in his flesh stretched wider, splitting to reveal a second mouth, yawning across his throat. The whispers surged, clearer than before. Sit with us. Eat with us. Hungry. Lost one? Their voices slithered into Nathan's skull, weaving with the gnawing ache in his belly. His hands trembled. Even knowing the source, the scent of roasting meat made his jaw ache with want, saliva filling his mouth against his will. Across the table, a bowl slid toward him. Inside, a slab of charred flesh still dripped with grease, hissing as it struck the wood. Nathan shook his head, backing away, but the unseen diners pressed closer. Footsteps shuffled all around, slow and circling. Cold breath slid along his neck, whispering hunger. The second friend screamed suddenly, head snapping back with a crack of bone. Then he dropped forward, plunging his face into the platter, tearing chunks with his new-grown fangs. The sound of chewing filled the cabin, obscene and animal. Nathan saw him not as a man, but as the latest guest welcomed to the dinner table. Everywhere, jaws worked, teeth cracked bone. The skeletons had risen now, their empty sockets following Nathan's every movement. Their jaws hung open in wide, grinning invitations. With a gesture, they beckoned. With their silence, they commanded. Nathan doubled over, clutching his stomach as hunger twisted into agony. Something gnawed at him from inside. The meat before him blurred, then sharpened again, shimmering golden, almost holy in its allure. A whisper brushed against his ear, so close it seemed spoken from his own skull. "If you do not eat, you will be eaten." Nathan staggered back until his shoulders struck the wall. He knew the truth now. In the Donner cabin, there was no escape, no mercy. One either sat down to eat, or became the meal. Nathan forced himself to stand in the circle of shadows, stomach writhing as the scent of roasted flesh clung to every breath. The whispers surged, relentless, pounding like a drumbeat in his skull. "Sit down. Eat. Join us." The skeletal figures circled the table, jaws clattering like funeral drums. The first companion was nothing more than a husk now, face buried in his plate, black smoke curling from his back, as though his body smoldered from within. The second, no longer human, lifted his head, eyes milky white, mouth split wide to his ears. He held out a glistening hunk of red meat toward Nathan, blood dripping onto the wooden floor in steady taps. Nathan croaked a dry scream, shaking his head, but his throat was too parched, his knees buckled with weakness. And then he heard it, another voice whispering beside his ear. Not a stranger's voice, but his own, warped and echoing from the dark. "You've already chosen. The table never runs out of chairs." Strength drained from him. He collapsed into the waiting chair. At once, the empty bowl before him filled, piled high with steaming flesh, the aroma suffocating. The skeletons pounded their bony hands against the table in ghoulish celebration, the clatter rising like a cheer. Firelight flickered over Nathan's face as it changed, eyes sinking into hollows, skin blanched, jaw twitching in spasms. His trembling fingers lifted a morsel to his lips. The moment his teeth pierced the meat, the cabin shuddered as if exhaling in relief. The whispers fell silent, replaced by a chorus of chewing, wet, relentless, eternal. Nathan's own sounds joined them. The grind of teeth through tendon, the convulsions of his throat as he swallowed. Outside, the storm ebbed. Dawn spread its pale shroud across the Sierra Nevada, and the cabin grew still again. Its door remained buried, its timbers dark, no trace of life left within. Only the table endured, set neatly with 3 skeletons, sitting in solemn vigil. On the 4th chair sat a new figure, rigid and pale, eyes hollow, jaw agape in a permanent invitation. The wind slipped through the cracks in the wall, carrying the faintest murmur. "We are still waiting." "Ah, woo." On Staten Island, the legend of Cropsey has never faded. They say he prowls the dense forests and abandoned sewer tunnels where the darkness never recedes. Towering, lurching, and armed with a rusted blade, he stalks the unlucky who dare to enter. Old toys, childish sketches, and pale, staring eyes hidden deep in the shadows are all that remain of those who vanish. And anyone who hears the scrape of metal dragging across the night never returns. Wait? The dirt road that cut into the depths of Staten Island's forest had long since been reduced to a faint scar beneath the weeds. Branches clawed at jackets as the group of 4 teenagers pushed forward, each scratch leaving pale marks like ghostly warnings. The fading afternoon light bled weakly through the canopy, falling in sickly patches across their path, as if the forest itself whispered that they should turn back. Willowbrook Camp revealed itself after a bend in the trail. Rows of sagging cabins with collapsed roofs and walls that peeled like rotting skin. The playground at the entrance stood frozen in silence, where a rusted swing swayed lazily, creaking in the breeze with a sound too hollow, too human. Nearby, a warped steel slide jutted upward, its base sunken deep into damp soil, like the headstone of a childhood long buried. Inside the first cabin, dust hung so thick that every step sent clouds rising like pale smoke. Broken bunk beds lay scattered in heaps, their frames twisted. In the corner slumped a gutted teddy bear, stuffing spilling from its torn belly like an unhealed wound. On the stained wall, faint crayon drawings still lingered, childish stick figures holding hands beneath the looming shadow of something impossibly tall. The children said nothing, but their eyes clung to every fragment left behind. One boy picked up a tiny tricycle, its rusted wheels squealing with each turn. The sound echoed through the hollow cabin, absurdly small, yet unbearably heavy, as if carried from a past that refused to rest. The sun dipped lower, smothered by the tree line, and shadows swallowed the camp. The air thickened, damp and cold, seeping into lungs until each breath felt stolen. From somewhere distant, a crow shrieked, a harsh, broken cry, then went silent, leaving a suffocating stillness. One of the teens tugged open the warped door of the storage shed. The stench of mildew rolled out to greet them. Piled inside were forgotten relics of play. Dolls with fractured faces, toy trucks missing wheels, a child's cap stained with a dark rust-red bloom. On a crooked wooden shelf leaned a stack of photographs, their images blurred by time. The children leaned closer. Each picture showed camp kids lined up in uniform, smiling with mouths too stiff, eyes too empty. A gust of wind slipped through the cracked boards, making the photos quiver. For a moment, it seemed as though the entire camp exhaled, heavy and tired. And in that instant, the intruders understood. They were not the first to wander here in decades. Something had remained. Something that watched, patient and hungry, from just beyond the dark. Nah. Night had swallowed Staten Island's woods whole, pressing darkness against every breath. The teenagers moved with flashlights in hand, their beams slicing thin arcs across the ruins of an abandoned bathhouse on the camp's edge. Hingis groaned as a sagging wooden door surrendered, opening into a chamber that reeked of mold and stagnant air. Broken tiles glistened with pools of black water, each reflecting the wavering light like liquid mirrors. On the peeling walls, crude chalk scrawls spread in tangled clusters, dozens of small figures drawn hand in hand, circling a towering shape with arms that scraped the ground. Its face was nothing more than a hollow smear of darkness. The group froze, beams quivering as they swept across the room. Every wall bore the same tableau, children gathered at the side of a looming skeletal giant. By the sinks, dark stains had dried into the concrete, trailing downward like veins of rust. They clung stubbornly, cracked into the floor as if time itself had tried and failed to erase them. The air shifted as a cold gust slithered in, carrying with it the sour stench of damp fabric, burnt plastic, and something far more rotten. In one corner lay a discarded Polaroid camera, its body choked with dust. One of the kids lifted it, finding a few photos wedged inside. Under the flashlight's glare, faces emerged, children smiling with distorted mouths, eyes empty sockets of pale gray. In one photo, behind the group of children, something massive loomed. Its outline was blurred, wrong, as though it had bled into the picture from another world. Then came a sound, soft at first, leaking upward through the pipes beneath the floor. A hiss, faint but alive, shifting into something higher, sharper. Laughter. A chorus of giggles rising and falling, echoing as if dozens of unseen children were playing just beneath their feet. The tiles trembled. Ripples spread across the stagnant puddles. The teenagers stared at one another, wide-eyed and mute. A flashlight beam swept toward the far end of the corridor. There, fresh chalk marks gleamed brighter than the others, drawn with unsettling clarity, and pressed into the dust beside them was a tiny handprint, wet, glistening, impossibly recent. The room fell silent, as though holding its breath. No wind, no birds, no sound but the hammering of their own hearts. And then it came, rising from the bowels of the tunnels below, the scrape of metal, dragging slow and heavy, rattling through the brick walls, announcing something that had already begun to move. That dragging metal sound pulsed again and again, steady as a deathbeat beneath the earth. The teenagers tried to pull away from the bathhouse, but their steps betrayed them, drifting toward the direction of the noise, as though something unseen guided their feet. Wind shrieked through the shattered slats, tilting flashlight beams into fractured arcs, illuminating shadows that seemed to close tighter with every step. Behind the rotting cabins they found it, a sewer hatch left slightly ajar. From the gap rose a chill so sharp it felt like ice in their lungs, carrying the rancid stench of carrion rotting in mud. The iron cover was streaked with rust, and below it yawned a ladder that vanished into endless dark. They shone their lights downward. The walls gleamed wet, veined with moss, every drip echoing like a clock tick counting down. Small handprints smeared the slick surface, layer upon layer of tiny palms, as if children had climbed down one after another. Some were fresh, wet enough that water still trickled in thin rivulets. One of them, braver or more foolish than the rest, set a foot on the ladder. The rungs groaned with a metallic scream under the weight. One by one, the others followed, swallowed into the dark. With every step deeper, the sound grew louder, not distant anymore, but crawling close. The deliberate scrape of something immense dragging its blade. It moved slowly, arrogantly, as though certain that prey could never escape. The tunnel stretched before them, endless and waterlogged. Stagnant pools lapped at their ankles, stinking of rust and mold. Abandoned relics littered the sludge, the bent frame of a stroller, a child's shoe gnawed apart, the headless remains of stuffed animals drifting like corpses. When the flashlights swept the walls, the chalk drawings appeared again. This time sharper, crueler, children with eyes washed white, clutching hands around a bent, towering figure whose grasp held a scythe. The whispers returned, clearer now, flitting through the tunnel like breath against their ears. High-pitched giggles swelled and faded, skipping from wall to wall, circling them, crawling under their skin. The water rippled, though nothing moved. Then the beam of a flashlight swept forward and froze. At the tunnel's end, a shape stood motionless. Too tall, shoulders hunched, head canted, unnaturally to the side. Arms dangled near the ground, one fist clutching a wide, corroded blade. The steel's tip scraped across the concrete with a shriek that shivered the air. The light trembled over his face, blurred flesh, mottled and uneven, as if dragged too far across bone. A face without balance, without mercy, and from the hollow sockets of his eyes, twin glints flared back like a predator's in the night. The teenagers froze, breaths caught, hearts hammered against ribs like prisoners against walls. And then, as though the light itself had awakened him, the figure moved, lurching, limping, yet impossibly quick. The scythe shrieked louder, grinding against concrete, the sound swelling until it rattled the walls. Water splashed violently with each heavy step, as if the entire tunnel were gasping, choking in rhythm with his approach. A scream tore loose, shattering the silence. Panic surged, and the group bolted, flashlights scattering wild beams across the dripping walls. Behind them, the dragging blade struck harder, faster, echoing through the cavern. And woven through the metallic shrieks was laughter. Thin, cruel laughter in many voices, the laughter of children long broken. Footsteps thundered behind them, heavy and relentless, each one reverberating through the marrow of their bones. The teenagers stumbled through the twisting tunnels, flashlights flaring wildly against the walls. The chalk drawings multiplied with every turn, little figures grinning with mouths stretched too wide, while the looming, hunched giant grew larger, swallowing entire walls, as if the tunnel itself was painting the hunter that stalked them. Filthy water splashed cold against their legs, sharp as ice. From the cracks above, the wind hissed, but tangled in the draft came whispers. Children's voices. Don't run. Stay. Come play with us. The words spiraled through the corridor, impossible to trace, near and far, all at once. Suddenly, one of them slipped. A flashlight clattered across the flooded floor, spinning, then landing with its beam locked onto the tunnel's far end. He was there. Tall, skeletal shoulders twisted, one arm dangling lower than the other. The scythe scraped the ground with a metallic groan, each drag louder than breath. The group shrieked, scrambling to their feet, but it was too late. Cropsey lunged forward. A long arm swung, the blade slicing through the dark. No blood, no spray. Only the hollow scream of steel cleaving air. The light flickered, died, then surged back. One of them was gone. Only a torn backpack bobbed in the filthy water. Panic tore through the survivors. They bolted deeper, Yet the tunnel coiled endlessly, stretching like a labyrinth with no exit. Every corner they turned, cold wind rushed from ahead, carrying shrill giggles that echoed like knives. On the walls, the handprints smeared thicker, wetter, as though pressed fresh by unseen palms. A flashlight beam veered right into a circular chamber. Its domed ceiling dripped with condensation, and scattered chairs lay broken in heaps. Shredded stuffed animals slumped in corners, while crooked frames dangled from the walls. At the room's center, a long table stood beneath a rotting green cloth, set with broken plates and children's toys arranged like offerings. The group stopped, gasping. The air felt swollen, pressing against their lungs. The room was waiting. Then, from behind the table, he emerged. Cropsy, Ma. No longer a shadow. Whole. His body warped, his face sagging like wax melting under flame. Deep sockets burned with a feral gleam, catching the flashlight's jittering beams. In his grasp, the scythe tilted, its blade mottled with rust and streaks of dried red. He moved closer, halting, deliberate, confident. The way a predator closes the space when it knows the corner has already been sealed. Each step struck like a drumbeat inside their chests. The air chilled, thickened, suffocating. They backed against the wall, slick with moss, nowhere left to run. Then, all at once, the picture frames fell. Glass shattered across the floor. From behind the broken panes, children's faces stared out. Eyes rolled white, mouths split into jagged grins. The voices came next, hundreds of them, threading directly into their skulls. Sit down. The feast is ready. The flashlights flickered, then died. The chamber collapsed into absolute dark. And in that void, only one sound remained. The long, deliberate sweep of a scythe, sliding across concrete. Slow, certain, inescapable. Nyanya. The blackness swallowed the entire chamber, so thick it weighed down every breath. There was no light anymore. Only the steady drip of water, the frantic thump of hearts, and above all the unending scrape of a scythe dragged across concrete. One of them screamed, flicking a lighter to life. The tiny flame stuttered, casting a trembling glow over Cropsy's face, just inches away. Flesh sagged like melted wax, one socket hollow, the other gleaming with a feral yellow spark. His breath stank of rust and rot, the stench of blood clinging to every exhale. The scythe swung. A scream was cut short. The flame snuffed out. Silence, then the splash of water, as though the tunnel had just swallowed another soul whole. The survivors staggered forward, plunging deeper into the maze. But the tunnels weren't the same anymore. The paths twisted endlessly, corridors folding into each other like a nightmare with no escape. Every footstep echoed unnaturally long, as though the ground itself refused to carry them closer to safety. Behind them, the dragging steel sang on the concrete, sometimes distant, sometimes right at their heels. Cropsy was playing. Another stumbled, their flashlight tumbling into the water. Its glow flickered just enough to reveal the figures. Rows of children standing shoulder to shoulder in the tunnel. Faces chalk white, eyes hollow, mouths cracked into rigid smiles. Tiny hands reached out, whispering, "Stay with us." When Cropsy stepped forward, the children's shapes melted into him, their pale faces vanishing into the grotesque swell of his form. His arm lifted. Another body was gone. At last, Only one remained. Breath ragged, eyes wide with hopeless terror, they ran on and on. Then, light, a faint glimmer ahead. An open manhole cover, spilling the glow of street lamps into the dark. The survivor clawed their way toward it, trembling fingers curling over the icy rung of the ladder. But the darkness thickened behind them, pressing close, heavy with the stench of rust and decay. A hand, long, deformed, skin hanging loose, closed over their shoulder. Cold breath brushed their ear. For the briefest moment they looked up and saw safety just above. A police cruiser rolling by, red and blue lights painting across the manhole's lip. They tried to scream, but no sound came. The scythe fell. Darkness sealed shut. Above ground, Staten Island lay quiet beneath the night sky. No one knew what had happened below, where children's laughter echoed once more, mingling with the scrape of steel on concrete. And the legend of Cropsey had never ended. I know.